Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's Down and Dirty is a request, and it was some tips and advice on using a thumb on an excavator. So for today's video, we're actually going to start outside the cab and we're going to start taking a look at the thumb itself, because in order to be effective at using the thumb, you need to understand how a thumb is supposed to work when it's correctly mated to the machine, and then you need to understand whether or not you have the correct bucket for the thumb you're using. So let's take a look at our thumb here. So we are running our little Bobcat machine today. Not my favorite machine by any means, but it is, it's got a nice little thumb setup here. So what we are looking at and what we are concerned with when we are looking at a machine with a thumb is, does the bucket mate with the thumb? And if a bucket correctly mates with a thumb, the tines of the thumb will contact in between the teeth on the excavator bucket. And so as you can see here, this is correctly mated because those tines actually hit the base plate of the bucket as opposed to coming into contact with the teeth. So this is a correctly mated thumb. If you have a thumb that is not correctly mated, a lot of times what happens is these tines will come into contact with like a quarter or half of a tooth here, and you don't really get good effective clamping force, and it's really difficult to use. If you guys have seen my vlog series when I was working with Taylor down in Ohio, which if you haven't, click up here for the link. But if you go watch that, you'll notice that multiple times I was irritated and frustrated because I kept trying to grab at stuff with the thumb and I couldn't grip anything. And that's because that thumb was a generic thumb. It was not made to work with that bucket, and so you really didn't have any good points of contact. Versus here, you can see that if we get anything remotely close in this area, this is going to pinch it between these two teeth here. Let me make sure my camera angle is correct. It's going to pinch it between these two teeth, and we've got some really good clamping force with this. That's what makes a thumb effective. Now we're gonna hop in the machine. I'm gonna show you a couple different techniques, and then I'll also talk about how you can make an ineffective thumb work for you in certain circumstances. So without further ado, let's go jump in the machine. Okay, here we are in the machine, guys. I have a variety of things that we can reach and grab for, and we can talk about some different situations in which to use the thumb. So the first thing I want to say is, it's very easy to think of a thumb very one-dimensionally. In other words, this is only a grabbing tool, and we're only going to use it to grab things. In reality, you can use this really effectively to push things around and to manipulate things. Sorry, can't talk. And so for instance, we've got this fabric in front of us, and it's not really at a good angle that we can grab it. And so what we can do is we can actually use this thumb in this position here, and we can kind of nudge it around and we can move it where we want it. So this thumb can become a tool that you use for other things other than just grabbing. Now, one caveat I do want to say is, obviously, you've got a relatively small bore cylinder, but it's also got a lot of length to it, which means you're not going to be able to torque the snot out of this thumb the way that you would the bucket. So if you really need to get aggressive at shoving things around, I would not encourage you to use the thumb for that. But as far as some light duty stuff, let's spin around here to these boulders. You know, we can very easily take these boulders and manipulate them wherever we want using our thumb. And because it's thin and narrow and it has a smaller footprint than our bucket, it can be really convenient, like in a situation here where we want to get in and you know, I really want to get in here tight and just move that one log. You know, it's far easier to use the thumb in this situation than it would be to use the bucket. So that's one thing I want you to think about is, with all aspects of your machine, try to think outside the box in different ways that you can use things. So let's talk about actually gripping things. These boulders, for instance, the best way that you're going to get those is with using the full width of the thumb. And so I would come behind it here, and there's one of two ways you can kind of approach this. First is we can put our bucket up against it and then move our thumb to close on it, or we can do the opposite. We can get our thumb down there and touch, and then I'm just going to curl my bucket in, and again, there we've got a good grip. It's not going to go anywhere. So that's kind of the general how you can pick up some larger items. It's pretty straightforward. Now another thing that we could do is we could only use one tine. So let's say I wanted to be a little dainty with this rock, so we're going to put our single tine right here and then close our bucket to it, and now you have the ability that we could actually, if you time it, we can roll that rock over and place it like that. So instead of always using the whole thumb, you can also kind of manipulate materials by using a portion of the thumb. The biggest thing you want to be concerned with, again, is we talked about the contact point. So if I close my bucket down, you're going to see it contacts up against the lip of that bucket. Since we know that, we can go after some smaller items. So we're going to reach way out here for this branch, this little root here. And in order to grab this effectively, I have to get it between those two teeth so that when my thumb comes down, the tine actually grabs it. And so we're going to do that. We're going to do it nice and slow. And you're going to see it's going to start to pinch. And right there, we got good contact. And we can pick that up and we can put it wherever we want. Now, had I grabbed it like this, with this thumb, I don't have to worry about it because we've got solid contact and it's not that big of a deal. But you can see where, because this is such a small, delicate item that we're picking up, if we didn't have good contact with that thumb, we wouldn't really be able to grab that. And that was the struggle I was having down in Ohio. The way you can kind of fudge that a little bit when you don't have a thumb that meets up with the tines is you have to make up for the gap with more material. So instead of being able to just grab the branch like I did here, we're going to move our stick for the sake of this. So instead of being able to just grab that stick, what I would have to do is fill some of that space with extra material. So I'd have to grab all of this material, and then I would have the pinching power because we've wedged the material and the stick between the thumb and the bucket, and we're grabbing all of it together. So that's how you're going to have to fudge if you don't have a thumb that mates. And that's why it can be really frustrating when you don't have a correctly mated thumb, because then you do have to fudge. And if you don't always have extra material, like when I was working with Taylor, like trying to grab, if we were going to try to grab this bush here, for instance, and we didn't have a thumb that made it up, like there's no extra material that I can make that space up with to pinch it and wedge it in there. And so then you've got to get creative, and what you can do is kind of get your teeth and kind of wrap the branches into them and then pull that way. That's one way that you can kind of get around that. But at the end of the day, when you don't have a properly mated thumb, you're just going to have a hard time with life. So let's talk about another aspect. Let's talk about our fabric back over here. This is, when I say delicate on this item, it's different than our tree branch. Our tree branch was a small, delicate item, and we had to kind of pinch it in a certain way. But now we're talking about a delicate situation where obviously we don't want to tear up our roll of fabric. We don't want to pinch the roll. We just want to lightly grab it. So the first thing I want to cover, we've actually got multiple things working here that I want to talk about. The first is this is sitting at an angle. Now we could use either our thumb or our bucket and manipulate this thing so it's perpendicular to the machine and it's easier to grab. Or what you can do is you can open up a little wider. We're going to place our bucket on one side, and then we're slowly going to close our thumb. And what's happening is it's going to pivot, which we're going to get this log out of here. And again, I'm only going to use one tine. I'm not going to go for the full grip. We're going to use one tine. So I'm going to put that tine up close, and then I'm going to curl my bucket to it. And now we've got, whoop. So it's possible to be a little too delicate here. But now we've got a good grip. We're going to move that out of the way, and we can just drop it right here. And if you get really exact, I mean, you can start stacking things. You can be really effective with these thumbs because you can physically grip stuff. So what we could do is we could stack this thing right here because we've got the finesse to do that. But going back to our circumstance here, I'm going to open wide, and we're going to create a pivot point around my bucket so that as we start to thumb down, it's going to twist this roll. And we're going to go slow because you're also going to have to kind of raise your bucket up so we don't dig into the ground. But you can see it's already starting to twist. So now that we've got a perpendicular, I want to talk about how can we grab this in a way that we're not going to pinch it, we're not going to tear up the roll. The thumb control on most of these excavators is going to be, yes, the thumb out there. I should specify, not my thumb here. The thumb on the end of the stick is most of the time going to be controlled with some sort of finger thumb control on your joystick. And you do have some variability in how slow or fast you can manipulate that. But you don't have nearly the control and finesse in this that you do in your bucket curl. So when I'm doing really, really delicate work, a lot of times what I'll do is use the technique we talked about where I will put that thumb up against my thing, whatever the object is I'm trying to grab, and then I'm just going to slowly curl my bucket in. And now you can see we've got some pressure on it. I'm going to increase just a little. And now we have a nice grip. We can carry this thing around and see I'm gripping it loose enough that it's actually slipping a little bit. So instead of grabbing it tighter and damaging my roll, now you want to think about the balance. It was kind of leaning this way. I'm going to swing over and I'm going to grab it a little more along these lines. Again, putting my thumb right up against it. Just nice and gentle. Now we have a very gentle grip on this. I have a lot of control with my bucket curl, more so than I do with my thumb control here on my joystick. And so whenever I'm doing super delicate work, that's generally how I'll approach the situation. I've talked about it in my vlog series before, but this is a great time to talk about it. 9 times out of 10, I will always make sure my thumb is pinned against the stick, for the simple reason that if you leave it out like this in a larger excavator and you're not paying attention, one of 2 things can happen. One is when you stick all the way in, your thumb can come into contact with the boom and it will damage the boom, it will damage the thumb. That's the thing I would be worried about first. The second thing is, in a larger excavator, that thumb will actually stick out far enough that it can actually damage the ROPS on the cab and come into contact with that. I'm familiar enough with this machine that I know that I can leave this thumb down in any position and it will never contact the boom. It's all safe. But one recommendation I would make for you, anytime you get into a machine that you're unfamiliar with, you want to do 2 things. The first thing is you want to curl your bucket all the way in to where it is closest to the cab, whether that's a full curl or if you're halfway there, wherever those teeth are sticking out the furthest, stick them out there and then pull your stick all the way in to see if you're going to have any contact with the boom or with the ROPS of the machine. The second thing you're going to check is the exact same thing with the thumb. You're going to check the clearance all the way through the travel to see if there's ever going to be any contact. And make a mental note of that in the machine that you're operating. Like I said, I know in this machine, I don't have to worry about that thumb hanging down. But if you watched my vlog series where I was running the 210, I did have to worry about that thumb hanging out there because it would come into contact with the boom. If you're in that situation, in that circumstance, make it a habit to always suck that thumb in tight to the machine so you don't accidentally damage the machine. So we can kind of play around here. There's you know, all sorts of situations you're going to find yourself in with a thumb that it just takes a lot of practice and finesse. You know, I was able to pick that up with no problem. We're not grabbing the snot out of it. We're not under the threat of breaking it, because you can be really delicate with this when you use your bucket controls like I was talking about. You can also use the thumb to fill your bucket, you know, overfill your bucket. So for instance, I'm not going to dig here. Let's go back over to our dirt pile here. So we're going to pull forward, we're going to go to our dirt pile. So outside of grabbing all of the stuff and using it as just a traditional thumb, the other way you can use this is we can pull our bucket, and you know, here's a circumstance where I don't want to roll this material out onto the yard, but I do want to pack it full as much as I can. So instead of curling and continuing to pull this pile towards me out into the yard, what I'm actually going to do is thumb in, and this thumb isn't as effective because it has a hole punched into it, but you can see it's going to shove more material into my bucket. And then this is where you get kind of tricky and complex with your controls. I'm going to curl the bucket, and at the same time I'm going to curl the thumb back. I'm going to curl the thumb back a little slower than the bucket, and what that causes to happen in the hydraulics is you've opened the valve so that hydraulic fluid can flow past it for the thumb. But now we're actually going to use the hydraulic power of the bucket pushing the thumb up to control the speed of that curl. And that will keep your thumb tight against your bucket, but it will also not cause your valves to go over relief. And I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to start curling in and thumbing in. And so I can control how fast my thumb comes in by pushing it with my bucket. The key there is you have to crack the valve for the thumb, otherwise you're pushing the hydraulics over relief, which is really not good for the machine. So that is just a practiced, it takes time to get sort of deal, and it's just all about the timing. So I'm going to thumb down to cram that material in my bucket, and then what I'm going to do is start curling, and I'm going to crack the valve on my thumb, and that's going to cause both to travel at the same time so that I can keep that material tight in my bucket. yeah, so that pretty well covers it. A lot of other thumbs, I like the design of other thumbs better, because instead of having this giant gaping hole in the middle, you actually have a solid piece of steel. And again, you can use that kind of like a trap door and slam stuff, or not slam, but pack things into your bucket a little better. It allows you to kind of get more full buckets without heaping it. And in a situation like this, where we're working in a customer's driveway, we don't necessarily want to dribble dirt all over. It's nice to be able to use that thumb to not only push more material into the bucket, but it also kind of caps it off and keeps it tight so that it's not dribbling all over the job site. So I don't really have a whole lot more on this topic, just because a lot of it from here is just practice. So again, what you're going to do is just practice finessing things, and like I said, the easiest way to do it is to get that thumb in a position that you want, get it tied up against your object, and then just slowly curl your bucket in. You're also going to think about things like, as you see here, if I put my thumb right here and I start to curl in, notice because of the radius of my bucket, we're going to start to pick up dirt, and we don't want dirt. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to adjust the arc. And so what we can do in this circumstance is I'm actually going to boom up as I'm curling my bucket, and that's going to allow my bucket to stay about the same level off of the dirt as I curl in and pinch this rock. Oh, we didn't quite get a good enough grip there. And again, this is all just kind of a learned skill. It's one of these things where it's just going to take some practice and some seat time to kind of get the hang of it and get better at it as to how you can manipulate things. One other thing before I let you go that I wanted to cover is when you get in tight to the machine, how you can pick things up. Oh, I didn't quite grab it quick enough there. Well, we'll grab the next one. Okay, so we're going to put this up tight against the machine. Let me make sure you can see that. Okay, angle you down just a hair. All right, so your initial thought when you're using a thumb for the first time is, oh my gosh, how am I going to pick that up? I can't get the angle on it. What you can do is you can put your thumb in an entirely closed position, and then we're going to drop over top of this, and then we're actually going to stick away from us while we curl our bucket in. And you can see what that's going to do is it's going to bring our thumb and our bucket together close into the machine. That's how you're going to grab things tight into the machine. You can see we can put this right here, and we can still, you're never going to grab it if you're trying to pinch it way out here. And so the way to do it is drop your thumb over top of it, and then start to stick out and curl in at the same time, and that's going to allow you to pinch these things right up tight against the machine. So I hope this is kind of giving you guys some helpful tips and tricks using a thumb. Honestly, like everything else in this industry, like everything else with this machine in particular, as you guys know, excavators are very technical machines. It just takes a lot of practice, a lot of seat time, and a lot of experimentation. So one of the biggest learning tools you can do, honestly, is watch good operators, get on YouTube and watch guys using thumbs and try to emulate some of the things that you see them doing. There's a lot of really talented people out in this industry that can really manipulate these thumbs and use them in some really creative ways. So like we talked about in the beginning, just remember to think outside the box, think more than just the single dimension of what you think it should be used for, and this is actually a really versatile tool. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, absolutely drop them below, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.